Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, it's great to meet you. I'm Stella, and today I'll show you how to make this set of miniature craft supplies for your dolls. And as always, I have free printables to help you make your own version. You'll find everything in the video, so now let's begin. We'll start with this tiny cutting mat because it's ridiculously easy to make and a great way to get a feel for the process. First, we'll cut this part of the template 2 or 3 times and we'll glue the layers together. The final piece should be about 1mm thick. And as usual, I suggest using cardstock from old packaging for this, since we generally already have some in our trash bin, and it's a fairly sturdy material that's also super easy to cut. You can use a cutting machine if you have one, or just regular scissors and a craft knife. We'll paint the edge of the cardstock rectangle black. Then we'll print and cut this part. Now, I used my selfie and I'll have it linked in the description along with all the other main supplies I used for this video in case you want to add it to your wish list, but really any printer will do. And if you want to get that shiny finish, you can just cover the print with some clear tape. We'll glue the prints to each side of the rectangle. And our little cutting mat is ready. See, it was really easy. Next, let's make a tiny ruler. We'll begin by cutting these tiny rectangles and we'll glue the 2 sides together. Then we'll cut this part and we'll attach it to the previous one. We'll paint the little ruler in a color of our choice, and I recommend starting with a white base so the final color will look more even. Next, we'll print and cut these strips and we'll glue them to the ruler this way. Finally, we'll coat the ruler with nail polish to give it a shiny finish. And I made both a centimeters and an inches version, though you can't really tell the difference at this size. Next, we'll print and cut this part, and if you're using my free printable template, I suggest using an awl to pierce these tiny holes and a pair of manicure scissors and a pen knife to cut these detail. Otherwise, if you have a cutting machine like a Cricut, a Silhouette, or an M1 Ultra like mine, you can use my digital templates, and they are available in my shop linked in the description. To tie the ruler to its packaging, we'll need a piece of thread, and I like to use elastic thread for this, but in a pinch, regular sewing thread works too. Finally, we'll fold the print in half and we'll glue the 2 halves together. Next up, let's make a tiny craft knife. First, we'll grab a toothpick and we'll cut it at a length of 2 centimeters. We'll carefully cut the center of one end this way. Then we'll cut this part from metallic cardstock, and pro tip, this is often found in food packaging. We'll slide this little blade into the slit in the toothpick. Then we'll paint the toothpick with acrylics. Next, we'll cut this little strip and we'll wrap it around the toothpick this way. Finally, we'll coat the handle of the knife with some nail polish to make it shiny. Next, we'll cut this part a couple of times and we'll glue the layers together. The final piece should be about 1mm thick. We'll cover it with this part. Then we'll print and cut this part and we'll cover this little window with a piece of clear plastic, and of course this also comes from old packaging. Next, we'll fold the sides and glue the tabs to create a tiny box. Time to move on to something a bit more elaborate, a binder journal. First, we'll print and cut all these tiny pages. Then we'll grab a piece of metal wire and a pair of round nose pliers. We'll shape the wire into 2 small rings. Then we'll open the rings sideways, this way. And finally, we'll slide all the pages onto the rings. Next, we'll cut this part from metallic cardstock. We'll sew the little rings to the cardstock part this way. Then we'll print and cut this part and we'll fold it like this. Next, we'll cut this part and we'll glue 3 pieces to the back of the journal's cover this way. Then we'll need a piece of elastic thread like this one. we'll slide it into these holes in the journal's cover, and originally I planned on tying the thread into a knot, but it was too bulky, so instead I glued it to the cover with a generous amount of white glue. Next, we'll print and cut this part, and we'll glue it to the journal's cover. At this point, we'll simply have to glue the journal pages to the cover this way. Next up, a tiny glue bottle. First, we'll cut this strip twice, and this time we'll use copy paper. We'll glue the first strip around a toothpick this way. Then we'll wrap the second strip around the first one. Next, we'll cut this part, and again we'll glue both strips around the toothpick right above the first one, leaving just a tiny small space in between the two. We'll trim the toothpick so that it sticks out just about 3 mm, and we'll sand it so that it has a pointy shape. Then we'll paint the bottle, again beginning with a white base and then adding some color. And if you want a more plasticky look, you can add a touch of nail polish. To make the cap, we'll cut this little circle a few times and we'll stack all the layers until we reach a thickness of around 4 mm. We'll cover one side of the resulting piece with this part. And then we'll wrap this strip around the cylinder. Finally, we'll paint the cap with acrylics and clear nail polish. And at this point, I decided I didn't really care for the pink cap, so I painted over it with some gold paint. Okay, so after wrapping up this video, I decided I didn't like the gold cap either, so I 3D printed a clear one. I know, I'm the worst. Finally, we'll print and cut this little label and we'll glue it to the bottle. And by the way, if you're thinking this is a total ripoff of tacky glue, how dare you? You're absolutely wrong, and honestly, I'm kind of offended. Next up is my very favorite piece in this set, a teeny tiny glue gun. First, we'll glue this strip around the toothpick this way. Then we'll cut this strip and we'll glue it around the first one, aligned at the bottom. We'll trim the toothpick so that it only sticks out a tiny bit on this end, and on the other end it's even with the paper cylinder. Then, just like we did with the glue bottle, we'll sand the toothpick so that it has a pointy shape. Next, we'll cut this part twice and we'll glue the two sides together. We'll do the same for this part. Then we'll combine the two pieces together. We'll repeat the same process for these parts and we'll attach them to the previous ones. Finally, we'll combine these two pieces together. Next, we'll cut this part and we'll glue the circles together. We'll do the same for all these parts and then we'll combine the 4 rings like this. We'll glue the resulting piece to the previous ones. Then we'll cut this part and we'll press it against a wet sponge to make it softer. We'll glue both layers to each side of the glue gun, pressing them down so they follow the shape underneath. Finally, we'll cut this and we'll glue it to the glue gun's handle this way. At this point, we can paint our glue gun with acrylics, once again beginning with a white base and then adding some color. Next, we'll cut this part and we'll glue the two sides together. We'll do the same for this part, and then we'll combine the two pieces together. We'll paint the final piece with acrylics. Then we'll attach it to the rest of the glue gun. To make a tiny glue stick, we'll simply cut a toothpick to a length of around 1 cm and we'll paint it with acrylics or even some glittery nail polish. Yes, Barbie likes her hot glue sparkly. To make a charging base, we'll start by cutting this part and we'll glue the two sides together. Next, we'll need a piece of thread, and again I used some elastic thread because it has that plasticky finish, but sewing thread works too. Then we'll cut this part, we'll attach the two sides together, and we'll glue the resulting piece to the previous one. At this point, we can paint the base with acrylics. Next, we'll dab a bit of UV resin on the cord, and we'll flatten it slightly with a pair of pliers. Finally, we'll paint it with acrylics. Next, we'll print and cut this part, and just like before, we'll slide some elastic thread into these holes. Lastly, we'll print, cut, and assemble this little box. And our little craft supplies kit is ready. As promised, here's a link to the free printable template, and if your dolls prefer sewing over crafting, you might want to make these sewing supplies too. And this is all for today. Until next time, bye!